Council is convened this morning for a couple of work sessions, January 14th, 2026. And we're going to start off with a presentation and I think a little dialogue back and forth with State Lands Commissioner Dave Upthegrove. We're really delighted that you could be with us, if only virtually this morning. And it looks like several of your staff are online as well. So welcome to you all. And I want to start out thanking you. I know we've had communications back and forth this year, and we're grateful for the opportunity to tour some of the forests in our county. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Commissioner.
Good morning. We're just resolving some technical issues. I apologize. I think we need one moment.
Oh, that's no problem at all. Maybe I can have the council introduce itself. So I'm Sue Marshall. I chair the council. I represent District 5, the northern half geographically of the county and where I believe most of these forests are. Councilor Young?
Sure, I am Councilor Young, and my district is number 1, which is the west half of Vancouver, almost entirely in city limits.
Councilor Belcott?
I'm Councilor Michelle Belcott. I'm Central Vancouver.
Councilor Fuentes?
Good morning, Commissioner Upthegrove. My name is Will Fuentes, Councilor for District 3, East Vancouver.
And Councilor Little?
Yeah, hi, Matt Little. I'm also on the east side of the county, and I also cover the towns of Camas, Washougal, Hawkinson, and some other areas.
And some of those forests as well. So, don't know, I guess we could vamp a little bit here.
Yeah. Or Chair Marshall and members of the council, we're swapping out laptops right now.
Okay. That's fine.
I've been told I have a face for radio, but I think it'd be nicer to I'm able to have the camera on. So
we would love to see your face. Don't listen to the distractors.
So I think it will be just one moment here.
Not a problem. We often have those problems too. Okay, we'll just pause.
Okay, I'm disconnecting now and reconnecting another computer. Be right there.
Thanks for the update. There you are.
Can't hear him.
Oh, but we can't hear you. Commissioner, we don't have audio. I don't know if it's on your end or our end. Oh, he can't hear you. Okay. I don't know how to signal that we can't hear. Oh. Still can't hear. I think he understands that we can't hear him at this moment. No. I've been advised that you can call in by phone and still be on the camera.
Look at that face. I don't even.
Good morning. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yay.
Hooray. All right.
I apologize for that, and
Not a problem. Those things happen.
I will jump in here if you're ready for me. And Chair Marshall, members of the council, thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to have the opportunity to sit with you. I looked at my calendar yesterday and saw we had 2 hours. I think this is the longest meeting I've had in my time as a commissioner, so I love it. I'm not coming with scripted remarks. I want us to be able to share information back and forth and have a discussion. And my thought was I would open up with some very, very general remarks just about the department, my first year, introduce some folks from our staff to talk about some local issues. And then before we go into the Q&A, bring it back to me, and I would focus specifically on forestry and some of my plans and thinking around that, and then open it up for the bulk of the time for us to have the conversation, if that sounds good.
Yes, that sounds perfect.
To you.
Oh, I've been advised it's not 2 hours. How much time do we have?
Now I can't hear anything.
We have 2 work sessions, and so
Oh.
that 2-hour block is to accommodate for both work sessions.
Can you hear me?
Microphone.
Oh,
One moment, we're going to try to get audio on our end. See if they. Would one of you be willing to speak to see if I can hear you?
yes. Can you hear us? Oh, it doesn't look like it. Well, we could be spending the first hour just getting this going.
How about now?
I can hear you. Can you hear us?
Would one of you be willing to speak?
We're speaking. Yeah, it's not working. Yeah.
Wait, I heard something.
Oh, can you hear us?
There we are. Yes.
Okay.
So
What
did
you
that
laid out
plan
was
sound good? Some opening
the pla-
remarks.
the plan sounds great, but I was advised that we don't have a full 2 hours because we have another work session. But we have
Good. That seemed like a long time, so I will shorten my my remarks some.
okay. Well, we want to hear as much as we can from you. So
Yep. Well, I'll do in
take it away.
real quick introduction. I'm finishing my first year in this new role as State Commissioner of Public Lands, and I've spent a lot of this first year on learning and relationship building, and that's meant getting out all over the state. We at the department do our work in 6 regions. You're in the Pacific Cascade region, and I've gone out and held town hall meetings and got to most of our region offices at least once, if not twice. I've been out touring with our staff and with other groups. Had the chance to sit down with nearly all of our 29 federally recognized tribes and with their councils. And I've been learning a lot. And one of the things that I've learned in this first job is we're almost like 6 agencies in one. You know, a lot of people think of forestry when they think of the Department of Natural Resources, but we manage a couple million acres of forest lands. We manage 1 million acres of agricultural lands as the largest agricultural landowner. We manage our state aquatic lands. It certainly hit me in the face quickly how much of a responsibility wildfire response and prevention is in this role. The flooding last month really highlighted the importance of our geology division and the work we do to detect and prevent wildfires. And it was a challenging year for a few reasons. If I'm allowed to use a dirty word, I kind of took office at a shitty time in terms of the state budget. I think anyone pursues a public service opportunity like this with big ideas. I think my predecessor had a slogan, which was do epic stuff. And I think my tenure here of these 4 years is really going to be marked by how do I manage an agency through a time of significant fiscal constraint at the state level, while maintaining our values and core services. So some of the ideas of expanding recreational opportunities and new investments in wildfire prevention. About the time I stood and took the oath of office, the state budget turned around and to multi-billion-dollar shortfalls. So that has meant significant budget reductions, both in the last state budget as well as proposed in this budget, that put strains on the agency and capacity. It's also sort of challenging times with our federal partners. We rely on federal grants to the tune of about $200 million, and there has been chaos and uncertainty and impacts to our federal funding. And, I think it was my second month on the job. Staff came to me as they were submitting their reimbursements for grants through the system, and the system just got turned off. Our code wasn't there. So we had been awarded multi-million-dollar grants. We usually pass through grants to conservation districts, local governments. Those organizations do the work. They send us the bill, we pay them, and then we send the bill to the federal government. And we started sending those bills to the federal government, and they turned off the computer system and wouldn't let us submit our reimbursement. And so we had to make decisions on a daily basis as do we continue the work or not. So there were a few sort of unexpected challenges in this first year. I also had the opportunity to go out and visit a number of our fire response sites and to learn about and support our efforts on fire suppression. And one of the challenges we're facing is last year, the legislature cut our wildfire prevention preparation funding in half from the commitment they made a number of years ago. So instead of getting 120 million over the biennium, they only provided 60 million. So a $60 million reduction. And that's going to mean more fires, bigger fires, and higher suppression costs. We'll do what it takes to put the fires out. I know the interest day really is forestry, but I want to introduce some staff, have them talk about some local issues. Then I want to come back and talk forestry, but I wanted to at least kind of share a little bit about my first year. Like many of you, I'm a generalist. I come to this job, I have a degree in environmental science, and for whatever that's worth, academic studies a while ago, and have focused my public service sort of in this subject area, leading the King County Flood Control District and serving in roles where I could follow that passion and intellectual curiosity. But I really do rely on the skilled professionals here at the department. And we have some of the best in the world working here at this agency, from foresters and botanists and ecologists and planners and data scientists. And you work with some of them on the ground, and joining me on this call today to help make sure I can answer your questions. I mentioned we do our work by 6 regions, and each region has a region manager that runs the operations in that region. And your region manager is Scott Sargent, and Scott's with us today. He's also joined by his assistant region manager who focuses on state lands, who's Steve Ogden, who many of you know. And then within our division, our Uplands division, which is statewide programmatic, we have our assistant deputy supervisor for state Uplands. That's Dwayne Emmons. And Dwayne, I think, has come and presented to you before. And we also have Sarah Ogden, who has a long title, Assistant Division Manager, Projects and Planning Asset Management. But I think Sarah and Dwayne are people that you have worked with before. And I also want to note that I did value the chance to sit down with you, Madam Chair, and with Councilmember Little early this summer, late spring, to have an initial conversation, and appreciated that introduction as well, and then excited to meet the rest of the council. But I would like to hand it over to Scott and Steve to give a very short overview of some of the local work that they've been doing, and then we'll bring it back and I'll tee up a forestry conversation.
Great, that sounds good.
Okay. So Scott, I think the floor is yours.
Yeah. Yeah, so under my chain of command, we have the fire response that we do down in Southwest Washington. We also have the state lands management, the forest practices, the logging regulatory side, as well as our forest stewardship program. So we have all those activities that happen in the region and down in the local communities there. Specific to the fire side, I know we've worked through a number of different things the last couple of years since I've been here with our fire staffing and making sure we have adequate fire staffing. I know they closed Larch, and that was a concern in the community, but we've made sure we've added some crews and made sure that we had adequate fire staffing and response the last couple of years down in that area. We've also worked with our timber sales program and our HCP. The tour highlighted that we did here a while back. And I will hunt to Steve to talk about that a little bit more.
All right, thanks, Scott. So I guess I'm going to start with kind of keying off of Scott. The way we're organized, Scott has 3 assistants, and so we have functional duties. And so my responsibilities are state uplands, which does include the timber sale program. And I do appreciate all the communication that that we've had over the last year and a half, actually, with Clark County Council. And I just want to thank especially Jordan for being the conduit to that conversation. It's been very nice to be able to email and communicate back and forth whenever there's a question of the council, right, and stay provide that information through Jordan. So I want to thank him for that. Within the state uplands program, of course, a lot of our conversations the last year and a half have really been around the timber sale program, and I believe the commissioner is going to talk about that more in detail. I wanted to call out a few of our other programs in state uplands that are occurring in the whole region, but definitely in Clark County. One that I'll call out is the Jones Creek Trailhead expansion. That's been really a 6 to 8 year project that we just completed this last spring, and kind of had a proverbial ribbon cutting, right? But that provides additional parking for the motorized recreation users in the south end of the large block, and we're really proud of the work, and also many of the volunteers that live and reside in Clark County that help with that project. So one of the things that I guess maybe we haven't had as much opportunity to talk about is the recreation opportunities that are provided on DNR trust land. A lot of those are in what we call the large block, right, which is not where we went on the tour in October. That's the block that's just immediately east of like Hawkinson and that country. We have a couple campgrounds in large block. We have trailheads and non-motorized trail facilities for equestrian, for mountain biking, for hiking, right? And then kind of more on the south part of the block there in Clark County, we've got the motorized users in some of those facilities. And so just kind of wanted to call out the good work of our recreation program and recreation staff for keeping ahead of all the work load that with that program. The other program I wanted to highlight a little bit was our conservation program. That's our natural resource conservation areas and natural area preserves. A fairly large natural area that we have in Clark County is called Lacamas. They're kind of a little bit southeast of Lacamas Lake, and a lot of good work going on that to kind of rehab the site and then get native species back in that site for the long term. These aren't trust lands, right? They're very much dedicated to long-term conservation. So wanted to call them out. Some other programs that we have in state lands would be our engineering program, maintaining our road system, both for business purposes such as timber sales or leases and things like that, but also so that our recreationals have good safe roads that they can get to these rec sites that we talked about. Some of the good work that's happened in the county over the last 4 or 5 years has been a pretty big lift. We had some very old and fairly large bridges. One of those we drove across on the tour in October in the Susan. I believe it's a 153-foot bridge across the East Fork of the Susan Creek, right? And those are pretty large investments, but we've got to find a way to accomplish that, and we've done a lot of work in that space in the last several years. So, Commissioner, I think I'll stop there unless there's other things you want me to address, but just that's sort of a flyover some of the good work in the last several years. I think you're muted, Commissioner.
Yep. Just stick around for the tough questions.
You bet.
No, to lead us into a discussion of forestry, I wanted to start by saying I think we all recognize our world is changing. We're experiencing the impact of climate change today. We're seeing a rapid loss of biodiversity locally and around the globe. And the Washington State Department of Natural Resources has always been a world leader in sustainable management of public lands. And I want us to do more. I envision a strong, healthy wood products industry in this state for generations to come. And in order to be economically sustainable, we have to be ecologically sustainable. And that means maintaining biodiversity. And I believe it's important that one part of maintaining that biodiversity as we sustainably harvest is maintaining a diversity of stand structure types, meaning at any point in time across the landscape, we should have a mix of younger forests, medium-aged forests, older forests. We should be managing in a way that maintains that biodiversity. And I am concerned about the pace at which we have harvested those structurally complex older forests. Our state's habitat conservation plan, that's the agreement we have with the federal government on how we will comply with the Endangered Species Act. And our multi-species plan, it envisions that in successfully implementing that plan, we're going to achieve 10 to 15% of our landscape and these structurally complex forests, but that's going to be in 70 years. I want to get us there faster. And that's why this last August, I signed a commissioner's order directing staff to identify 77,000 acres of structurally complex and older forests, and to begin exploring management strategies other than our traditional variable retention harvest. This is the largest forest conservation initiative in this state in a generation. The commissioner's order was the first step, and it was a big step, but it really was just the first step. There's a lot of work yet to be done. And one of the things that I knew coming into this job that really was like a 2x4 in the face when I got here was doing this work within the box of a number of legal constraints. Number one, constitutional language that provides a fiduciary responsibility to manage certain trust lands or federally granted ones, as well as statutory responsibility to manage our remaining trust lands in a similar manner. State laws that prescribe how we calculate sustainable harvests, federal agreements to comply with, also budgetary and operational constraints combined with cultural challenges, both in the state and at times within the agency. And so the approach I have taken is to build a runway of stability, is what I call it. We are planning to implement our 5-year tactical plans. And that will include a mix of forest types, including some structurally complex forests. While we innovate and diversify our management of on 77,000 acres of structurally complex and older forests. One point that's important to make is the commissioner can't take lands out of trust status. The Washington State Board of Natural Resources sets the policy for the agency and approves land transactions and land sales. So we can always make decisions. Any commissioner can just not put a sale on the agenda for a particular meeting. That does nothing to change the legal status of that land and the legal responsibilities for how it's managed. So where this landscape level system change will be taking place is at the Board of Natural Resources and through the legislature. The biggest opportunity to chart the future for forestry is through what we call our sustainable harvest calculation process. It's kind of a mouthful, but we're required by state law to set harvest targets by each trust, each area, following a pretty robust process. What assumptions we build into that sustainable harvest calculations as a Board of Natural Resources are going to be critical. Is the board going to assume that we're not going to harvest certain forests? Are we going to make updates to our policy on sustainable forests? These are all things that will be considered as part of this sustainable harvest calculation process. Also, in order to ensure we are on firm legal ground, we need to be providing benefit to the trust from these lands. And the state Supreme Court has said that doesn't mean you have to maximize revenue. The court has clarified that you can provide benefit in a multitude of ways, not just wood products and timber harvest. And also, interestingly, the court did acknowledge there's a responsibility not just to the trust, but to the public. And lawyers like to argue over what that line means. I believe that court ruling is very aligned with my philosophy, which was these lands belong to we the people. They belong to the public. Yes, we have a responsibility to manage them for the benefit of the trust, but that trust was created for the people, by the people of this state. And so those broad public values, biodiversity, climate, recreation, aesthetic values, we have an opportunity to fulfill that vision of managing these lands to benefit the trust and the public. Whereas we update our strategic plan for the agency, that philosophy is going to be embedded in that. And as we seek new tools to manage structurally complex older forests, it's in that spirit. I believe we have firm legal ground to do that if we do it right. It's going to require new tools. Like I said, it's going to require changes in policy at the board, and probably changes in financing. We've asked the legislature this year to give us the authority to sell carbon credits, ecosystem services, the monetizing the value of other assets besides wood products can provide a meaningful piece of revenue for the agency and for the trust beneficiaries. Most other government or many other governments and the private sector use this tool. We need that tool in order to innovate and diversify. There are alternative management strategies we can use both on the 77,000 acres and explore over time on our own lands that are, everything from less intensive harvest, which thinning is the shorthand term for that. But one of the challenges there is our traditional harvest methods, variable retention harvest that you're familiar with, generates revenue for beneficiaries and it funds the work. It pays for our foresters. Often thinnings or more ecological forestry cost the state money rather than generate money, depending on where it is and the nature. Sometimes it's a wash, and sometimes you can make a little bit of money. It'll cover your costs and make a little bit of revenue. It really depends on proximity to roads and proximity to mills. But so moving more in that direction would mean new ways of financing the agency rather than self-financing through timber harvest program. And we would need to ensure that we're meeting our legal responsibilities to the trust as we do it. So there's challenges. The bottom line is I'm taking a landscape level approach, a systems approach. At the board, I think a lot of friends in the conservation movement often focus parcel by parcel and have a policy debate around each parcel. At the board, at the agency, when we're looking at timber sales, we're really looking at, is this land that's designated to be managed for revenue for the trust? Was the timber sale prepared in full compliance with all the policies of the agency? And if that's the case, the timber sales move forward until we change those policies and change those systems. The designation of the 77,000 acres, we're refining. We put out a map. We wanted to make sure we were geographically or spatially specific, but it is a model and it is an illustration. And since the announcement and the original map was released, we've gone through and we've corrected a bunch of errors. We had some data that was outdated. We had things on there that, just needed to be cleaned up. That's the easy part to do. We also are removing tiny little parcels, the little specks. And then about a month or so ago, I announced some large contiguous parcels that were being added to the map. And I think there were 5 of them. Several were added because of specific commitments I had made previously, and several were added because of their high ecological value. And so that updated map will be out. It's important to recognize when you see that map, that's not a map like the Habitat Conservation Plan that puts some defined legal boundaries. Because it's a model, it is, with 80% certainty, there's going to be adaptive management. Really, what it reflects is where we believe the structurally complex forests are that are not in our 5-year plan. We do our timber planning on 5 years. Like I said, we have a 5-year runway of stability to maintain financing and staffing at the agency. And we get these other tools in place, carbon markets, new financing, policy changes at the board to implement the system change that we need. We're operating in an antiquated system. This was created about 120, 150 years ago. And this notion of tying trees, timber harvests to school financing, I don't think makes sense. We end up pitting kids against trees, and we end up having a much more fiduciary responsibility where dollars drive management. We manage our state aquatic lands according to the public trust doctrine, which is more flexible. This is according to a fiduciary trust responsibility. And because of that, there's a lot of constraints and challenges as we work through this. But I think that, future generations are going to look back and, I think appreciate the work to try to preserve some more of these special places that provide that economic and ecological stability. And like I said, this agency and the staff of this agency is always innovative, have always stayed on the front edge of these kinds of reforms. I want to ensure we continue to do that. Along those lines, we have some staffing changes that are taking place that help align us for this work. In the commissioner's office, I have a small staff that provides policy support. We have a new policy director, Kate Dean, who some of you may know from her time on the Jefferson County Commission, brings strong conservation values and an understanding of rural economies. We just hired, and she hasn't yet started yet, forestry strategist. Her name's Paula Swadine. She's been the policy director at Conservation Northwest, brings strong conservation values, a lifetime of experience, worked at DNR, Fish and Wildlife, served on the Forest Practices Board, and is going to help me manage this work. We recently promoted we have long titles here, Deputy Supervisor for Uplands. The best way to describe it, that's the person who's in charge of our uplands, our forestry, overseeing all of that work. And so we have a national search underway right now for the person who will really head up our forestry operations here at the department, looking to find someone who has the experience to lead a large team, the background in forestry operations, yet also someone who shares my vision for reform and continuing to grow and do more as an agency. And we've repurposed an FTE for a very senior position reporting to that, who will be solely focused on driving innovation and diversification, particularly on the 77,000 acres, some with a background in ecosystem services, innovative ecological forestry, and work on replacement timberlands in some cases. So I've dumped a lot on you there. I should acknowledge, I know there are lots of people who want me to do more, go faster, undo past sales, stop sales that are in our short-term plan. But to be successful in implementing long-term changes at a landscape level, and in order to accomplish the most we can for climate, for biodiversity, and for older forest conservation, we have to be thoughtful about how we do this. We have to bring people with us and have to be financially responsible. And we have to meet our legal obligations. And so I'm doing everything I can based on my experience and knowledge to advance those values to the greatest degree possible, and invite you and your your team to join in this difficult work. And I will stop talking.
Great, thank you. That is a lot to consider. We're in the last throes of our comprehensive plan update, so we can relate to the need to balance competing interests and also the budget constraints and the uncertainty at the federal level. So there's a lot. We're all getting hit in the face with that 2x4. But with that, I think I'll open it up to the council if they have specific questions to ask you, and I'll save mine till the end. Go ahead, Councilor Little.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for that overview. And I really appreciate all the decisions you have to make and the direction you're headed. This is kind of my wheelhouse. I used to be the director of the Cascade Forest Conservancy, and I'm still serving on the Gifford Pinchot collaborative groups.
I thought maybe you'd apply for that the forest strategist job here at DNR.
No, I love my jobs that I have right now. But I just wanted to drill down to Clark County. I have two questions. The first one's related to, both are related to letters, multiple letters that we've sent to you. The first one is about local timber sales, and I really want to focus on what you said, where you're still moving forward on timber sales until you change the policies. And I wanted to really focus on that because our letters were about local timber sales that we, or at least I felt, were unnecessarily heavy-handed in the amount of cut. The regenerative harvest that we saw on the tours are basically clear cuts with a few remaining clumps of trees that would probably blow down in a windstorm. We were trying to encourage your staff to change the prescription of that timber sale to some type of thin that was also would pencil out. And I know there's such a range of thins you can do, and you can do skips and gaps, but you can certainly do it in a way that would be provide economic benefit and pencil out for the local community. I wanted to ask about that because what we were seeing and what we assume we will see in the near future is timber sales that involve structurally complex forests with maturation to areas, and also overlapping owl habitat or directly adjacent to it. And what we saw in these prescriptions, we asked for a change, and we got no change in the prescriptions. And what happened were basically clear cuts directly adjacent to older growth forests that are owl habitat. And so I'd like to hear a little bit about your vision of how you might change the policies in the future and when that might occur, so that we know. I'm pretty sure that I could hear from the last letter that we sent that there's exhaustion on this council of sending letters to you and getting no real answers. So in future sales, I'd just like you to know that we still, or at least I do, believe in the same, trying to find the same kind of compromise out there for our local forests, and just trying to get a sense of what you see in the future for our local timber sales that we're going to be seeing, I'm sure, coming up any day now.
Well, one, I want to let you know I did receive those, and the input is valuable. I'm looking for ways to strengthen our systems, get input earlier on our long range plan systems approach. You know, what are in 5-year plans? What's the long range plan? The reason, and let me start by saying, I love more gentle treatments and prescriptions. You know, I wish we didn't have the constraints we have, and I want to move us towards that. You take and I don't even have the names of those, so I won't. I can speak generally. The reason variable retention harvest is done, and I know that in some cases it can look like a clear cut depending on the intensity and where the leaf trees are, and so but I also know you can look at a hillside and say, that's private land, that's DNR land, and you'll see our land managed better. The reason we do that is it generates revenue. I mean, that's why it's done. And maybe, I don't know those particular sales, maybe if we took staff and went and reconfigured them, they could break even or make a little bit, but it becomes a dramatic reduction in revenue. And our budgets for staffing are built on a set of assumptions. And you would need to do a lot more of that in order to generate the same amount of revenue. So as long as we have this fiduciary trust responsibility and a lack of other financing mechanisms, there's going to be challenges in prescriptions that are less intense. I also, more importantly, would say those are addressed best, if they, in our policy for sustainable forests that are adopted by the board that determine essentially the forest practices that we'll use. Obviously, we comply with the Forest Practices Act. We comply with our federal HCP, but we also can go beyond that. But those are better made on a sort of a systemic level. When would we use those treatments? And then being able to budget for those, operationally plan for those. The reason I started by saying getting upstream, there's also challenges. As you know, it takes a couple of years to prepare a timber sale. You invest quite a bit of resources, and then a challenge that happens when we reconfigure, or we often hear the term swap out a timber sale. The staff that would do that are busy preparing the next timber sales, and we're, things that sometimes sound pretty straightforward on the outside create operational and budgetary challenges that are real. Doesn't mean we shouldn't lean into those. But the short, blunt version as to why on our lands that are currently not being managed for conservation, that aren't set aside for owl, for marbled murrelet, are managed using variable retention harvest, is because that is what generates the revenue and what has been deemed to be sustainable. again, I'm interested in changing that. But doing that in a way that maintains operational and budgetary stability, and doing it in a way that reflects policy changes through the board is hard work. I don't get to just wave a magic wand or flip a switch. There's going to be a legislative request this year, I believe, that would request some funding for us to subsidize some of that work, to do more gentle silviculture treatments, and then with some direct appropriation from the legislatures to help make up some of that lost revenue to beneficiaries and to help finance the agency. That would be a helpful tool. But at the end of the day, if lands are in our lands that are managed for timber harvest, if they're designated, we call them GEM lands, general ecological management lands, all of our policies as effectuating state law and constitutional responsibilities drive us towards variable retention harvest, and just doing on a parcel by parcel basis each time a sale comes up, looking at reconfiguring it isn't the methodology to achieve that change, I don't believe. We will always hear people out. We'll always look for opportunities earlier. We do some thinnings. We do a lot in the spotted owl areas to accelerate stand stage development. And some of those do pencil out. We've had a few that actually make a little bit of revenue, but the bulk of that is subsidized by the legislature with direct appropriations. So it largely comes down to money and policy consistency.
Okay, thank you for that. I just wanted.
It's kind of a rambly answer. I'll try to be more concise in these.
That's fine. I just want you to know that I believe that there are things that you can do now that would improve the wildlife habitat needs, especially directly adjacent to these areas that I just mentioned. Creating buffer areas and having a lighter prescription in those directly adjacent areas would go a long way. The second question is related to I think the last letter we sent to you about the SWAP program. And we had a potential idea of an area that we thought would be appropriate for our local community to do that. And just wondering what the process was. We're very interested in participating in that. And just wondering if you're thinking about a potential different area that might be further north.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to it, and then when I get the process wrong, I'll have staff jump in. We have a couple tools that allow us to take lands out of the trust and into conservation status. One is called the Trust Land Transfer Program that the legislature's approved. It has some limited application because one of the requirements in state law is that they be deemed not productive state lands. These are designed for lands that are not generating revenue for the state, where the legislature provides funds to buy them for another organization, and we purchase replacement lands. And I think the particular parcel, I don't remember the name of it, I'm sure I have it in my notes here, is a productive revenue generating agricultural parcel for the state. So it wouldn't be eligible for the trust land transfer program according to requirements of state law. We have another legislative proviso. The legislature gave a pot of money to have us go out and essentially buy out the trust to protect areas of structurally complex forests and use that money to acquire replacement timberlands for the trust. And this parcel doesn't meet the requirements for that. It has some valuable ecological features. That particular funding proviso was specific to structurally complex forests. And so I know staff has been looking at another parcel, and I would love to, if you don't mind, to have, I'm not sure who the best person is, either Scott and Steve or Dwayne, maybe speak more specifically to that parcel or parcels and what conversation they've had with your staff. Who wants to take that one? Dwayne, I think, maybe.
Right. So, Commissioner, thank you. And Chair Marshall and members of the board, for the record, my name's Dwayne Emmons. I am the Assistant Deputy for State Uplands. A couple of different parcels I think we're thinking about or talking about. As the Commissioner noted, I think that the council or Parks Department within Clark County did propose a trust land transfer on an agricultural parcel that won't really meet the needs of trust land transfer. The other letter, I think, Councilor Little, that you were referencing, did identify some area, and this is where I'll have Steve help me, identified an area to use that natural climate solutions funding to set aside that land and have us acquire new working lands for the beneficiaries. That proviso does require the land to be structurally complex and carbon dense. So it has to be that maturation 2. Unfortunately, that area that was proposed, I think the vast majority of it is not even really reaching the early maturation stages. So it's not going to be a very workable fit for that funding. I did ask staff to identify some areas that would be more appropriate, and I know Steve and his team did identify some areas that are, to your point earlier, Councilor Little, adjacent to owl habitat, on base for harvest. So potential areas that can add to that already existing conservation and making large blocks. So as I noted when we did the field tour, I know Clark County is very interested, and I did let the commissioner know I promised we would find some area in Clark County. And so I think that is an engaging staff to staff with Jordan, with others that you might recommend, or Councilor Little, you and others, to really break out the maps and identify areas.
If I could just follow up on that, because I think there's the swap, there's the replacement, there's reconveyance, and I don't know if there's different rules, or even if I've even noted all of the possibilities. But and I'm happy to hear that you've been talking to our Parks Department. We are collaborating with all of the cities, and I think looking at how, especially as everything has grown so much in Clark County, how to do things in a more collaborative way. And I think the lands that are DNR lands, especially if they're adjacent to a city, have great potential to be included in our park strategy. And there was one particular parcel near Battleground, and I don't know if that's the agricultural parcel that you were talking about, or if what are all the options as far as land swaps generally?
Yeah, and I do like to describe it as the most complex game of Monopoly you'll ever play. Every parcel of land, every tool comes with its own rules. And again, as the commissioner noted, different constitutional requirements, enabling act requirements, et cetera. Reconveyance, as you noted, Chair Marshall, is one, and it has been used in Clark County in the past, in I think the more distant past. There's actually a park in the city of Vancouver that was common school land. It was federally granted trust land back in the 60s. We had to do an exchange to make it county trust land. Then the county asked for reconveyance to convert it into a park. County didn't use all of it. They're interested, the city is interested in building some affordable housing on a portion. Well, the rules say it has to be used for park purposes. So we've been having some initial discussions to convert some of it back to another use that then the county could acquire. 100 different hoops to jump through. But yes, reconveyance for park purposes is something that can occur on lands we manage for the county beneficiaries. A direct transfer, a direct acquisition. School districts often buy land from us. It doesn't have to go out to public bid. It can just be a direct appropriation, a direct purchase. Trust land transfer is really just a direct purchase. The legislature funds that purchase. So those are really the tools. There are different legislative programs, different appropriations. And again, very complex. So working staff to staff, right, to navigate all that is something that, I think we just need to continue to engage in.
Great, thank you. We'll look for those opportunities. I appreciate it.
And may I
Councilor
add
Little?
one piece on that very
Oh,
quickly?
yeah.
This notion of reconveyance, and for folks who don't know, we generally speaking, this is oversimplifying, have two kinds of trust lands. The lands the federal government gave us at statehood, and then we have land that once belonged to counties that in Great Depression got put into our hands. It's that second category that we're allowed to reconvey. And so in the case of the parcel by Battleground, it's federal lands. We can try sometimes swap and move it around, but the point I was going to make is I encourage you to work with the counties association. I know there's a lot of interest in the reconveyance program in general, and I'm interested in working with you if there are opportunities or ways to make that program work better. We have counties that are on my case because they want more cut. They're furious that we're not cutting enough. We have counties that want to see more conserved, and sometimes, in finding ways to, I'm very open to if some of these county lands being back in the management hands of the counties is not a bad thing in my mind. We want to be thoughtful about how we do it. And so I think there's room to explore statewide what do our reconveyance law look like? How do we make sure it does meet the interests of the counties? And I know those conversations are taking place at the association.
Great, thank you. Other counselors with other questions?
Just a couple quick comments. So I appreciate you coming this morning, and it's nice to put a face to your name at this point and be able to have
My
this
goofy name.
conversation. You know what? I always thought your name was perfectly appropriate for the office that you were running for, just to say. But I would say that, I've kind of had a sense of, I experienced the same thing. When I entered this office, I had a lot of goals, a lot of things in mind. When you take office, you realize that there are all these constraints, all these barriers, and a very difficult process to get a lot of those things done that you want to accomplish. And there's never a simple way forward, but you put your feet to the ground and you get to work, and it takes some time. So I appreciate many of your comments on that. I think the most important thing that I would like to get through is that, I've heard from when we were on the tour that it's been at least a decade since Clark County has really even been interested in this process at all. We have a council that is very much engaged in this process and would really like to have as much input into the process as possible. So I appreciate this dialogue, and I hope that you will do your best to find a way and communicate with us and how we can help direct the process and how the lands that are inside of Clark County, how we can help have a plan for that and see how it can, combine with the values and the goals that we have as well at the council. So thank you for coming today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And I welcome advice too on how to strengthen that ongoing communication. As I mentioned before, we're exploring ways to get, as I would say, upstream in our communication, as opposed to giving people opportunities to comment on something, on a timber sale as it's coming to the board. That's, more of a look at long-term planning. And the other thing I would say is I'll do my best to make time available, but given the scope of responsibilities, I have to rely upon our region managers, our division leadership. And so often I may not be the best person to talk to. And so really cultivate those relationships with Scott and Steve and their team and their district foresters. I think they are, I don't know if I could speak for you, Scott and Steve are thirsty to have those conversations and dialogue and share. They were probably chomping at the bit to answer questions, Matt's or Councilmember Little's first question about prescriptions. I think they could talk for hours about how and why they design certain prescriptions. And how they deal with edge habitat and those kinds of things. So I think there are, I would say, much like folks who work with you as county, it's building those authentic relationships, getting to know those region staff and building some trust and positive working relationship with each other. Doesn't mean we'll always agree. I mean, but having complete information and understanding, I think. And I want to figure out how to do this better.
Thank you. Councillor Belcott, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, for joining us today. It's pretty exciting, and we're looking forward to collaborating with you. And I think you just mentioned it. So to better strengthen communication with you and your staff, you're suggesting that we just go primarily through Steve and Scott in the future?
I would not say just. I would say often you can get, I will always do my best to be available. But the nature of, when it gets down to individual parcels and lines and those sort of operational decisions on the ground, they are much closer to that. And I rely upon them for that. Engaging in systems reform, working together on legislation that gives us new financing tools, building support for innovation and diversification. I'm really operating much more at the landscape and system level. And I think it's both, but often, let's say you called me, you're welcome to, and you have a question about a particular land sale, or you have some ideas on something in Clark County, the first thing I'm doing is picking up the phone and I'm calling Scott and Steve. And, so often more efficient, quick, accurate, and if it's about kind of information exchange, and often that's the best level. Maybe Scott wants to add something to that about how to best work with the region, but I didn't want you to hear, don't call me or don't talk to me.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I would add to that, Commissioner, that like if they reached out to me and it was not the specific thing, or it was a higher level thing, right? I'm going to reach out to the appropriate Uplands Division or whichever program, or the commissioner himself, depending on what the topic is, and get that to the right place. So so a lot of those site specific things, we're the ones managing the region. We can provide that feedback, and if it's a higher level thing, then I will shuttle it to the place that it needs to be in the agency.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it.
And next time I'm down there, maybe I can bring some of I have policy director, Kate Dean. I don't know if you worked with Kate at the county. She's a great point of contact for some of these conversations too. My chief of staff, Diana Phibbs, and others who, if I'm not, it's the nature of being the elected official. I'm often in a meetings all day. And so it's often hard to have that quick phone conversation here and there, but having a policy director, a chief of staff, just making sure we're getting you connected with the right names and faces and phone numbers. And, but a lot of the work in the region is driven by the region leadership.
Thank you. We can relate on the all-day meetings.
Yes.
Thank you. I have just a few things I want to touch on, and maybe we can take a few more minutes before we get to our next work session. But and I think there's been frustration within the public on how to really make a difference, because as you said, the timber sales take a long time to develop, and then the public gets engaged really very much at the end. And I know there's a great deal of interest in that 77,000 acres and changes in the map. Maybe just using that specifically. How can the public get more involved earlier and really have a more of a sense of empowerment in this process?
Yep. I think it is a great question, because at the end of the day, we want to be serving the public and the trust. And we're looking at ways. There's been various at various points of time, as I've done research over this agency's history, there have been different ways to formalize input. This, whether it's annual meetings with counties, those kinds of things. So we're looking for ideas on how to do that. And but I would say the biggest for those that are interested in conservation of older forests and doing it in a way that's thoughtful and maintains our economic position as a state, the biggest things people can do to help right now probably are to support legislation to, I'm not, legislation to give us the authority to enter carbon markets would allow us more flexibility. We also have requested legislation to add a member to the Board of Natural Resources, to add a tribal representative. Having that perspective on the board and going from 6 to 7 members, I think is something I'd encourage people to look at the impacts of what that would be. The activism is set up, and I've been a part of this before I'm in office too. A big part, I figure I come from the environmental movement. It is much easier to organize around a sale, something that is planned for harvest. And I get that, and I understand it. It's in front of you. You see it. It's tangible. But again, whether or not a particular sale comes to the board at a moment in time doesn't change the legal responsibilities on that. I want to move this agency in a new direction and permanent lasting change in how we're managing our forests. And so finding time in the citizen activism movement to also put some energy into that system change, not just for and against timber sales. Because like I said, if we have a timber sale that's in our lands to be managed for the trust that complies with our policies, until, I have said we're not going to touch 77,000 acres. Other than that, those sales are likely to move forward. And so it can be a lot. I get that. It's a lot of banging the head on the wall. And I'm asking people to join me in working on a long-term plan to innovate and diversify the management of our older forests and to continue to do more for habitat and climate. And that is more than just this timber sale, yes or no. It's what Councilmember Little's comment and discussion around how we do forestry, I think is an important part of the future. How long are our rotations? What are our treatments? And every one of those decisions comes with legal and economic trade-offs. And an analogy I like to give is in the police reform movement. A lot of people want to see different kind of policing. Or it's hard to just get rid of policing and then come and figure out what to do next. Sort of like this, it's, we need to build the next thing before we get there. And that's why this concept of a runway of stability as we get these tools and change the policies is what I think is going to be most successful. And getting people engaged somehow in that work is going to move the ball the fastest in forest conservation in a thoughtful way.
Thank you. And just related to the trust beneficiaries, I've talked to some of them related to some of the sales, and they, often we don't take a position on that. They don't want to get between the environmentalists and the harvesters. But it can be a significant source of revenue. And I know there's one school district in particular had difficulty passing a levy. So the funds that they receive are tied to that levy rate. And it may be difficult, but I wonder if there's a way to decouple that so they could get that benefit from those timber sales. We're all hoping that they pass their levy, but they'll be sort of doubly penalized if they don't, and then they can't get any of the benefit from the harvest.
Yeah, Battleground is, I know, has faced those challenges. I would like to make changes to how we finance and how this, how the funds are driven out. In some areas, it is very, very meaningful. It's not something that I have the ability to do. It would require legislative changes, but I'd be open to working on that. The trust responsibilities to generate revenue for schools is an interesting one. I think back when our state was created, it was a huge piece of the money for general school construction. Now, if you take those federal lands and you add up all of the revenue generated for school construction off of, again, the federal lands that were given to us, that makes up about 1.5% of the state share of new school construction. That's a mouthful, but it means that if you pass a school bond, you get some matching funds from the state. 1.5% of those matching funds come from these federal trust lands. And our superintendent of public instruction has said, don't want it. Don't let that be a driving factor. The county lands, as we call them, the state forest board lands, was one I mentioned that during the Depression we manage for counties. That revenue goes to local governments, and then the county distributes it to your junior taxing districts. That can be very, very meaningful to local governments, particularly in certain timber dependent counties. If you go to Wahkiakum, Skamania, if we don't do a timber sale, that county goes bankrupt. It can be 50 to 70% of their budget is the timber sale we do that year. Small rural fire districts, library districts. It's a real public policy challenge as we seek to manage as we try to do more for habitat and climate and broad public benefits. My bottom line is I don't think the answer to local government financing and school financing comes through DNR. We're really proud of the contributions we make to schools and local governments, but the solutions long-term to local government financing or schools, we can turn the dials, a little bit more money here and there, but these solutions are systemic. The legislature should fully fund public education. We should manage our forests for economic and environmental sustainability, and we shouldn't. And great, and that can generate some revenue, but the revenue shouldn't be the driver to the extent it is with a constitutional responsibility and a fiduciary trust. And so these are things that often require constitutional amendments that there's not support for. And so I just want to be a voice to talk about, ways for us as a state to think differently about this.
Great, thank you. It is really complicated. I did want to mention just large correctional facility. I served on a task force. I don't know if that's on anyone's radar screen. I think that's another item that will take some money, whatever is decided to do with that. We lament that it didn't just continue as it was. We thought it was perfectly good purpose and addressing local fire issues and training folks so they can move on with their lives. Have you been thinking about Larch Mountain facilities?
Yes. And thank you, by the way. I know you spent a lot of time and attention on that issue. And, I don't think we wanted to see it close. The CAMPS program, which is the program we have where folks in correctional programs will participate in wildfire response. We've seen huge benefit, people developing job skills. We've hired people at the department through that program, and some work for our contractors now. And it's a shame that was closed. And I worry about the impacts on fire season. As we've had the resources, and previously we did put a new hand crew in that area and staff some fire engines down there to try to make sure we have the response capacity in the area. But we're facing now huge cuts to our wildfire preparation budget. So I am concerned. We're going to work do everything we can with the region to ensure resources are positioned. And we need to work with Department of Corrections on, they have responsibilities there on that property, whether it's decommissioning costs, whether it's rehabilitation. And we want to work with you on what the future holds. I haven't, as a commissioner this year, come in and said, here's what I want to see happen there yet. But I want to see that put to beneficial use for the community in a way that fits your vision. And I think a lot of it just comes down, like everything, to dollars, and corrections is strapped right now.
Right. Thank you. And I do just want to acknowledge the importance of actually harvest. We have a mill that's unfortunately burned down, but they have plans to rebuild Western Forest Products. They rely on some of the larger trees. They rely on the trees that DNR is managing and for the products that they put out, because it's all for export, but there's not many mills, I think, left that can handle the larger trees, but they've managed to eke out a pretty good business model and produce a fine product. So, so that's
especially
neat
if we
as
go to
well.
longer if we get to the point where we figure out how to finance longer rotations, which most scientists and foresters agree brings some real benefits, we need to have capacity for that. I give a lot of thought to wood supply as we want to do more for climate and habitat. And one interesting thing I've learned, we have big trees in forest stands that are not structurally complex. And I think some intentionality about identifying where do we have opportunities to harvest big trees that are not structurally complex. And looking at, even within our owl areas, we have stands that have not developed into structurally complex forests for whatever reason, microclimate, soil conditions. Not every forest develops the same. And are there opportunities to sort of, for lack of a better term, swap out? So I am interested in working, whether it's large wood, whether it's hardwoods, being cognizant of the impact of decisions on wood supply and seeking strategies to mitigate. Also, I think a big part of the future is developing those markets for the smaller products, the cross laminate timber, and working with Department of Commerce and industry partners to promote that as well. But I did see the mill that burned, and I do know there's a need for supply for larger wood products, for larger trees. And I think that doesn't have to be inconsistent with a vision of more conservation. And that comes back to, you also can have different kinds of treatments that still provide wood supply with a more gentle ecological impact.
Great, thank you. Well, we haven't taken 2 hours, but I think we've taken a good amount of time. Is there any closing thoughts anyone has? I think we'll stay in communication. And again, really grateful to you and your staff for all of your time this morning and your continued work in managing our forests.
Yes, and let's make this I would like to deepen the relationship, both personally getting to know each of you and helping build relationships between our senior staff and you and your senior staff.
Great.
Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just wanted to point out that I think that is happening right now. I do see that there's a lot of collaboration with the local staff. So I do appreciate that. I didn't want to sound like we're just complaining. And I do like those ideas there that there are forest practices, as you mentioned, that can grow our larger trees faster for harvest in a sustainable way, as opposed to some of the practices used now. And skips and gaps and the lighter and different types of thins are ways to do that. And those are things that are being used in our national forests for the late successional reserves strategy. So there is a way to harvest some now, leave others later, and put them on longer rotations that would benefit everyone. So I'm thankful that you're thinking about that, and I really appreciate the time that you put into
No,
this.
I love that vision. It's all about I have no values difference there. It's how operationally and budgetarily and policy wise getting there.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I enjoyed this. I appreciate it.
Great.
Good to see you.
All right. Well, we'll close